Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Budget Game Reviews. Today's subject of a cheap review is Tintin on the Moon. Now this is the C64 version, but because this is the most budget game we've seen so far and has a tiny amount of content, let's also include the Amiga version so we can try and make this a decent length of video. Now this is the box it would have been released in initially. As we can see, it has pictures from multiple platforms on the back and just a sticker on the label to indicate which platform it's for. Inside we get a manual and the cassette. The manual, as we've come to expect, is just a single bit of paper that has been folded a couple of times, though it does go over all the controls that you need. The Amiga version, well, this is pretty much all I have left, as it came in this massive great big box with my Amiga full of BU Jolly budget titles. So let's give it a go, shall we? The game starts up with this pretty decent intro, though I do feel it's missing something. You know, that thing that made the Amiga famous? A nice bit of tracker music. The sound effects? Yeah, they're decent enough, and it has some nice speech.
3, 2, 1, fire.
The C64 on the other hand, well, as you can hear, it has this really good bit of SID music, even if the intro itself was much more cut down. And if there was something that both these versions did, well, it was to drop you straight into the game. No title screen, no nothing. The game itself is effectively made of two parts. The first, when you're directly controlling the rockets, and your goal is to collect those red spheres that will move you through the stage, and the yellow spheres, which will give you more fuel in this section and more time in the next. The Amiga version, unsurprisingly, looks quite good, but as you might be able to hear, the sound effects are absolutely horrible. I have absolutely no idea how someone thought that was a good idea, why this absolutely ear-piercing sound effect was chosen. And it really doesn't help the fact that one of the better strategies to this game is to try and collect a lot of the yellow balls early on, because it gets much harder as you go on, which means you intentionally have to miss a lot of the red balls just so you can get those yellow ones. After you collect 8 of the red tokens, the game will take over control of the ship and fly it off the top of the screen, as the game is getting ready to take you on to the next gameplay section. And this is where the game turns into a platformer, and you have 4 goals that you have to complete if you want to move on to the next flying section. And those goals are: disarm the bombs, put out fires, free his companions, and catch the dastardly Colonel Boris. And while the map is fixed, where each of those goals are will be randomly placed in the levels. Now, one thing I have noticed on the C64 version is that the fires will be placed before you start, where in the Amiga version, Colonel Boris will continue to set new fires for as long as he's free, which means it can be a bit more difficult to try and track them all down. It doesn't help that when you actually take out Boris, he will actually get up after a while as well, so you really have to be on the ball and trying to find everything and take him out before it's too late, as you are against the clock. Now on the Amiga version, the clock will only go down when you're on a screen that has a fire, where on the C64 version, it will constantly go down as you play, which you might think would make the C64 version harder, and in some ways it is, but on the Amiga version, the more fires there are on the screen, the faster it will tick down. And if you do all of that, well, you get to experience that horrible sound effect again, as you're back controlling the ship. You have to do this for 5 stages. And between each of them, you have one of the platforming sections. As you can imagine, the further you get through the game, the more difficult it becomes, as the speed and number of asteroids dramatically increases. but the speed of the collectibles pretty much remains the same, so you can sometimes see them being overtaken by the asteroids, so you have to try and dart in and out to try and collect them. This is why I think it's better to try and collect lots of time early on, and then try and ride out the later level. Though I will say I do quite like the tumbling animation for when you get hit. Both versions do put on a pretty decent show for it. Now you might be asking, Goldfish, are you already running out of content for this game? And the answer is yes. This is a very slight game. There is not a lot to it at all. But there are a few more things that's worth showing in the platforming section, so let's jump on to the next level, shall we? One of the annoyances of the fact that the game randomly generates where everything is the fact that it sometimes can be quite difficult to find the fire extinguisher. As you don't get that initially, you have to actually find it in the level. And it's pretty much your main weapon against Boris as well. In theory, you can get the drop on him, but it really doesn't work all that well in practice. So once you've finally got that fire extinguisher, you can actually get to work. Now you might be thinking, hey, we're in a rocket, why aren't we floating? Well, there seems to be some form of anti-gravity, and you can actually disable it by hitting the F1 key, which is useful for collecting items that are above you or being able to fly yourself up onto other platforms. Now I don't think I've ever actually read the Tintin book that has him going to the moon, so I'm not entirely sure why Colonel Boris is trying to set fires and bombs on the rocket ship, particularly seeing it's a rocket ship he himself is flying on. That really doesn't make any sense to me at all. The Amiga version had some pretty interesting environments, even if Tintin's run was a little odd. The C64 on the other hand seems to have gone for this very purple looking spaceship. I'm not entirely sure why it's all purple. I'm guessing it's the closest thing they had to a lot of silvers. It's a good job they gave the bombs a pretty distinct sound, as visually they do tend to get lost in the background. And after saving the rocket ship multiple times and guiding it through all those asteroids, what do we get to do? Well, we have one last gameplay section. Well, it's not really a gameplay section, as you can't lose. It's just a way of trying to convert your extra fuel into points. And I have to admit, I forget that every single time. And all we've got left is the outro, with finally a lovely bit of tracker music. So I'm going to leave it there because that was Tintin on the Moon. So until next time, I was the Goldfish, that was a kid who thought taking a dog to the moon was a good idea, and this was Goldfish on Games.